Hi, everyone. Welcome to Explore the Possibilities webinar series. Today, we're talking about accessibility and usability with Aspen Discovery. My name is Jordan Fields, and I am the Aspen product librarian, and I'll be taking you through the webinar today. I'm also joined by a couple folks at Bywater, notably Kirsten Krager, who's one of our developers, and she'll be answering your questions in the chat. So throughout the webinar, if you have any questions at all, please go ahead and post those in the chat. And then time allowing at the end, we'll go ahead and answer as many of those as we can. So with that, let's just dig right in. So for any Aspen presentation, we like to start by talking about the Aspen Discovery goals. And for our topic today, goals 2, 3, and 4 really all apply. Goal 2, maximizing user engagement with the library. We can't maximize user engagement if we don't have an accessible library website where anyone can accomplish any of the goals that we've set out. And usability, of course, is also a part of that. If the interface isn't usable, people can't accomplish what they're looking to do. Goal number 3, connecting every user with a personalized and accessible library home base is also key here. With accessibility, it's great for everyone. And with it being personalized, the same accessibility features don't necessarily work for everyone. So we have some personalization features as well that will help make sure that everyone can access Aspen. And then the last one is my favorite here. Empowering library administrators to customize and expand Aspen. We have options for you to make sure that all of your users can be reached in both an accessible and user-friendly way. So I just wanted to start out with a brief introduction into what is web accessibility. And the basics here, the definition on screen is actually from the W3C, but it's making sure that all of our web technology and everything that we do with our web technology is available for people with disabilities. Not only for them to be able to see and access the site, but navigate, accomplish any of the tasks within the site, and then actually be able to contribute back to the web in the same way or not necessarily in the same way, but in a comparable way to any other user. I do want to note that when we think about accessible design, the first thing that comes to mind is maybe different disabilities, but accessible design is actually good for everyone. My favorite example comes from a couple different talks that's actually come up, where if you think about a sidewalk, when you come to a busy intersection, frequently the texture of the sidewalk will change. You'll get some little bumps that kind of indicate that you're coming up to an intersection. And that's great for people with low vision. It indicates a change, something they need to pay attention to, but it's actually great for everyone. If you think about how many times we've gone down the street and you see somebody, with their head buried in their cell phone, that little bumpy texture on the sidewalk is actually great for them too. It also helps to indicate to them, hey, please pay attention before you're looking at your cell phone and just kind of walk straight into the intersection. Responsive design, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is later, is also great accessible design. If a site is responsive, the ability to make things bigger is not just great for smaller phones, but it's also great for people with low vision that might need the text a lot larger. So also, most of us at one point in our life are going to need some of these accessibility features. So when we talk about accessible design, we really like to make sure that we're talking about design for everyone. And that's the way we think about it with Aspen Discovery. So getting into the specifics of Aspen and accessibility, Aspen is currently compliant with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, or you'll hear us say WCAG. WCAG is kind of short for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. If we're meeting these guidelines, we are also meeting your Section 508 guidelines, if that's something that you pay attention to, and you should. I'd also like to mention that our developers are members of groups such as the International Association of Accessibility Professionals and the User Experience Professional Association. So we do the very best that we can to stay up on these trends. Having said that, We do release features monthly. We release a lot of features, and no one is perfect when it comes to accessibility, and no one is perfect in any sense. But we do occasionally have bugs, but we consider those bugs critical issues to resolve. And everyone has bugs in their software. That's kind of a normal thing. For us, it's about the ability to respond to those and fix them quickly. So getting straight into some of the Aspen accessibility features. The first one that I want to talk to you about today is color contrast. So this is part of that goal number 4, what our Aspen administrators can do. You have a lot of power within Aspen to make it look exactly the way you want to match your library branding. And with that comes dozens and dozens of colors, of link colors, of text colors, of background colors. But how do you know that you're actually designing something that has enough color contrast for someone with low vision to be able to read Aspen effectively? So something we've built in to Aspen is this color contrast ratio that you can see on the right over there. For the WCAG guidelines, anything over 7 is considered good. You're no problem, you're fine. Anything over 4.5, and that's 7:1 or 4.5:1, is considered okay. It's not great. Anything below that is not good. So what you can see here is that if you are at the highest level of guidelines, which you should shoot for, you're going to see a green there along with a number to give you another visual indicator. If you're in the iffy area, we give you a yellow. And again, the number is there as well, so you can see exactly what the contrast ratio is. If it is below that 4.5, we won't even let you save it. We're not going to let you build an inaccessible website in this way. So this is one of the features that gives administrators the power to see exactly what they're doing, but helps you, since you can't, it would be really difficult to check every single page in Aspen every time you change a color. We provide this tool so that you know nothing is going wrong with your color contrast. The second thing that we do in Aspen is that we don't only use color to signify meaning. Now, using color to enhance meaning or to give cues to meaning is totally fine. Like, you should absolutely do that, but you cannot only use color. So in the example here, you see a couple of different formats, and then you have statuses in different colors. So if the book is available on shelf, you do see a green, but you also have the words on shelf, and that's what's key. It's not just green. If it's checked out, it's red. And then if it's maybe not at your library, but you could still get it from one of the libraries that you have access to, it's yellow. We do the same thing with things like alerts in Aspen. We can make it red if it's something that really needs to get your attention, but we don't ever want to use only that color to signify the importance of that message. Another thing is considering the content flow of pages. Now, with the 2 images that you see here, I took these in a browser window, and the browser window was exactly the same width for both of these. What I did was, for the image on the right, I bumped it up to 400%. So someone with low vision might need the letters to be just a lot bigger, and so would navigate Aspen at with much larger text. So what that does is it puts it essentially into responsive design, the same thing that you would see on your cell phone. But for both responsive design and when we've made the text this much larger, it's really important to consider the flow of the pages here. So if you look at the one on the right, of course, we have the header, but then the next thing you see is the languages and display. This is where you have the option to change how you interact with Aspen as far as languages. And then we have a new feature I get to show you later about how the display works, which is important to tackle first before you really get into the content. But the thing I really wanted to point out to you today is in those red boxes with the filters. When responsive design first came out, a lot of the time it was, okay, we want the main content on the page at the top, and then we're going to take the sidebar content and we're going to move that to the bottom. But if you think about how a user uses Aspen, no one is going to even think to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page to filter content. We need to let the users know that there are at least filters available as they are searching, or closer to the top of the content. So you can see with the filters with the left hand, with the full width screen, those filters have actually been tucked into the button on the image on the right, so that a user can use them within the searching context They're not all the way at the bottom. And if you click that filter button, it would actually expand those filters. So that filter feature kind of expands and contracts depending on whether or not the user chooses to use a filter. But this is why content flow is really important, making sure that it's logical as far as what the user might be trying to do. In this example, filtering a search. We also need to consider the purpose of the content, and this is particularly important for screen readers. And this gets into kind of the intersection of accessibility and usability. So I'm going to go over a couple of different types of content. The first is informational content. So think about this as any type of content that's giving the user information, a web banner maybe describing the details of an event. If you're familiar with Aspen, I think of this a lot with placards. And it's really important here to make sure that with informational content, your alt tags are fully descriptive of that content. So I've seen some really beautiful placards that are kind of a full image, but if you don't fully put all of the information in that image into the alt text, a user using a screen reader is not actually going to be able to get at that content. So that's something to consider if you're an Aspen administrator. Functional content is more like navigational content. So if you think about using an image for the next arrow on a book carousel, there's something where we would want to make sure that like an ARIA tag is going to describe exactly what that button does. So you're not going to say just say this is an arrow. You're going to want to say, this arrow, like arrow to forward content to next book cover or whatever it is in that case. The third on the screen is decorative content. And this is where I'm thinking about usability. Last time when we think about decorative content, it might just be, in this case, like even looking at the slide, like the blue rectangle, like that's not important to the user. But within the context of Aspen, it might even be something like a book cover and search results. If someone is using a screen reader, how important is it that they hear that there's a book cover there? Now, if we had great alt text that described all of the book covers in detail, we could probably debate that point. But we don't have that kind of detail. So is it really helpful for someone using a screen reader to hear, book cover, book cover, book cover, book cover with no additional information? Really, that's just extraneous information. So what Aspen does is it will skip that decorative content. It's not going to say the book cover. It's not necessarily relevant to someone that's using a screen reader. So that's another little feature, something that we have in Aspen. The last type of content that I don't have here, I'm just going to call it out because it's also a webinar on accessibility, is the complex content. Think about navigating maps online. There are definitely things to consider with accessibility there, but we don't have a lot of that content in Aspen, so I didn't feel like we really needed to call it out here. The next thing I want to talk about is within the content itself within Aspen, it is great to be able to call that out when that content is accessible. And this is something we've worked with a couple of our libraries on. When the data is available within the MARC record or within whatever record we have more than MARC records within Aspen, we can put in this closed captioning symbol that lets our users know that, hey, this particular version of this DVD actually has closed captioning available. So someone that is hard of hearing can actually go through, and in this case, they all do have the closed captioning, but I've seen cases where only some do, and they can go through and find the one and place the hold on the one that meets their needs. Another feature that was recently requested by our Aspen users group is an accessibility facet, so that when there's information available within the record that lets us know there's a specific accessibility feature, we could actually call that out in a separate facet. And we can work with that group on making sure that we have the data and that we're using the data within the MARC records to build that facet. And that's really key for this one. It's entirely reliant on the data that's within your records, but wherever we can, we want to call out these types of accessibility features. So now something a little bit exciting that we're going to be offering in the next 2 months. It's in testing right now that will let you personalize Aspen to an even greater extent with some strong usability features. So what this is support for multiple themes. If you look at any Aspen site right now that has multiple languages enabled, so only if you have multiple languages do you get a language button in the upper right. we'll also be providing support for multiple themes. So you'll, instead of that language dropdown that you get today, you'll get a languages and display button. So if you click on that, different things happen whether you're logged in or not, because again, we don't want to make it accessible only for logged in users. It needs to be accessible to everyone. So if the user is not logged in, they get a modal that pops up that you see right here. If they are logged in, then it takes them directly to their settings. They go to their settings, it saves it permanently for them as they're logged in. Otherwise, it saves in the browser until the next user changes it the same way that it changes language today. But what this lets you do is if you have multiple themes set up, it lets you select between these different themes. So let's go through. I have these 4 set up to just show you today. The first is a light theme, or you could call it a default theme. This is maybe what users would see when they first come to your website today. So it's always going to be accessible. You don't need one of the, you should not actually create like an accessible theme. We need everything to be accessible, but there are different things that we can do to make it a little bit more or less accessible. But this is just kind of the default. The second theme that I've put together for today is one that's optimized for high contrast. So this means that we dialed up the contrast as much as we could. You see black and white pretty much everywhere, although it still looks like Aspen. We still have a logo there. We can still use colors where it's not necessarily text on a background, but overall it's high contrast. The second one that I show you is similar, but there are some slight differences. This one has been optimized for a person with dyslexia. My understanding of people with dyslexia is the background, you want a high contrast theme, but you don't necessarily want it to be black on white. That's a little bit jarring. So the very pale yellow or a cream color here is just a little bit easier for someone with dyslexia. The other thing that we've done here is we've uploaded a theme designed for people with dyslexia, or not a theme, excuse me, a font. There we go. And there's some debate, I know, whether or not these fonts are actually better or worse. Make your own decisions. All of this is in your Aspen administrator's hands. But if you wanted to do something like this with Aspen, you absolutely can. The last one I wanted to show you is one that we're really excited about. And again, accessible design is good for everyone. Some people might really need to not have so much light coming at their eyes. So a dark theme is so much better for them. But lots of people want a dark theme for other reasons, environmental reasons or just preferences. So we actually can give you the ability here to do a dark theme as well. Now, these themes don't come necessarily built into Aspen. We're building a sharing feature where we can share them and you can set them up. You'll have to set them up with your own logos. But we're excited to be able to offer administrators the opportunity to provide these extra themes and meet a whole other categories of users. And I'm sure there's just, I'm excited to see what our libraries actually do with these. It's going to be really cool. Okay, second part of our presentation, we want to talk just a little bit about usability. The definition of usability on the screen right now is from the ISO standard, but I wanted to call out what we see in bold, that with usability, we're trying to achieve goals effectively, efficiently, and with satisfaction. So when I think of effectively, it's like, can they do it? Like, is it possible to do it? Efficiently, how easy is it? Is it 20 steps? Is it 2 steps? How quickly did they see it? And then I really like the last one, with satisfaction. Did they like it? I think with web design, a lot more goes into how users feel than we think. And we should definitely be considering that satisfaction aspect as well. So a little bit about Aspen and usability. The first thing that we do is, as members of the development team, me and product, or like Kirsten, our developer, is we looked at common web patterns when designing new features. The theory here is that we want things to feel familiar to patrons. The library website isn't the only type of website that our patrons are going to use. They're going to use Amazon. They might use Barnes and Noble. So we need to make sure that it looks and feels the same as other sites. That's the #1 principle. Another thing is that Aspen has actually been around for quite a long time, more than a decade. And throughout that time, we've been doing formal and informal usability testing. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about what that usability testing has looked like, but it's something that we've been doing for a while. The last thing is one of the more important ones as well. You are the ones that are working with your patrons, and we need to partner with you in order to hear directly from the patrons that use Aspen. There's no other way to do it rather than to like watch or hear and get feedback from the patrons that are using it as far as usability. Okay, a little bit about the different kinds of usability testing that we do. We have done some formal usability studies. This tends to be for when we are making a big change within Aspen. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute and show you part of one of those usability studies. But this is where participants tend to be organized ahead of time. They know they're participating in a usability study. We have a predefined script with goals that we kind of take them through. We talk to them, you say, okay, it can almost feel like a test sometimes. So as you're talking with these patrons, it's like, we're not testing you, we're testing the software. It's kind of a big deal to put these on. And this also typically includes a report. This is, like I said, a very formal usability testing. We also have done a couple of different informal usability types of studies where we'll set up in a library and you kind of get foot traffic from patrons and kind of call patrons over and be like, hey, would you mind answering a few questions? And then just kind of show them what's going on and ask their opinion or ask them to do something there. It's not quite as formal. There's another way that we do some informal usability testing, and that's in response to patron feedback. If we put something out that we don't usability test every single thing, but if it's not usable, we hear about it right away. And that's one of the nice things about the way that we do development is we can respond to that patron feedback really quickly. And these informal studies are done to quickly test ideas, respond to recent code. It's actually, especially the response to patron feedback one that we do the most. The last one that I want to talk to you about is A/B testing. This is where users get different experiences. It's done a lot in email. You've probably also seen it in some social media where maybe you're getting advertisements and you see different images for the title of where the title of the article is the same. That's actually usability testing, or they're trying to test, not usability, it's more like marketing, to see which actually gets you to click on it, which image. Or with emails, they'll see which type of wording or which images get patrons to act on them more than the other. We don't do any of this type of testing. There are some ethical questions around this. Essentially, what's happening here is you have participants in a study that aren't aware that they're in a study, and that just feels a little ooky. And we also find that we don't really need to do this kind of usability or this type of testing. It's not like it's not necessarily usability testing, but we find that with formal usability studies and just informal studies, we're getting what we need. We understand how users are using the software, and we don't necessarily need to conduct studies on people that don't know they're being studied. I did say I would show you a little bit of one of our formal usability tests. This is for a new facet design. Like I said, we tend to do these when we're doing big changes to the interface. This facet design that you see on the right, you're seeing the responsive smaller screen here. We also tested a large screen. We implemented a very similar design to this within our Aspen Lita app, and we're planning on this as an option for Aspen Discovery as well later. But what you see on the left are some of the comments from the folks that did this testing. And what I really want to call out is the participants saying what they liked. This is getting to that satisfaction aspect. So you see participant D noted that they liked the filters displayed, the filters displayed the options selected, or that they noted that they liked how the filters scooched to the left. So there's some motion to show that something is happening with the filters. Like I said, that gets to the satisfaction, and that's really part of the advantage of the formal testing when you're making a big change, is the ability to test not only does it work, but how does it make people feel? Okay, I wanted to close today with a quote that I saw that I think just really sums up what we're trying to do with Aspen Discovery and accessibility and usability. When UX, or user experience, doesn't consider all users, shouldn't it be known as some user experience or sucks? And that's what we're trying to avoid with Aspen. We just really want Aspen to be awesome. We want it to be amazing for all users. And yeah, so with that, I will go ahead and open it up for questions. And again, I don't see any questions in the chat. Feel free to ask away.
We have one that came in that asked, I have no one on site that has experience with website design. How does the Aspen implementation help along the way to suggest good practices when creating the website?
Wonderful. So you could see some of the features built into Aspen right there. So for the most part, if you'll see the accessibility features, you'll see the opportunity to enter alt text. You'll see making sure that the color contrast is good. But your implementation, you can ask your implementation specialist, Morgan or Cal, depending on who you're working with, and they will be able to get you answers. Like I said, Aspen is set up to be accessible by default. And if they don't know the answers, then they're going to come back and talk to me or talk to the developers and make sure that you get the answer you need. But just so you know, like, it's set up to be accessible by default, as it should be. I see a question in the chat that says, can a patron turn on dyslexia feature for one session and then go back to default? Yes, absolutely. It's the same. It will work the same way as language. We did build it in so that, knowing that many computers it's a single person using a computer. So even if you haven't logged in, it will remember that. But that little button at the top in the upper right-hand corner will always be there. So folks can go and click on it and change either their language or the interface that they want to use. So I have a question that says, how are the customization themes obtained and delivered to local library Aspen administrators? Again, this is a brand new feature. When it first comes out, it'll likely be that you need to develop these on your own, but we are actually working on a sharing feature at the same time, as well as a copy feature to make additional themes a lot easier. It will always take a little bit of customization on your part though, because even if you just think about the logo up there, you're going to want to change your logo. The logo for a dark theme is going to be really different than a light theme. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible, but that's definitely something that you would need to adopt as your library. Like, yeah, this is something that we want to support and something that we want to put a little bit of work into.
Jordan, we had one that came in on the Q&A that asked, what other options for user personalization are there besides languages and themes?
There's a couple different ones. You can actually, well, I can't open Aspen right now. You can save lists. You can have saved searches, and we can actually notify you when your favorite author has a new title, or when something coming in, when we have a new topic, a new book on a specific topic. For recommendations, we have a recommendation engine that will suggest titles based on things that you've rated. That is also, it tweaks itself over time. So just because you like Captain Underpants as an elementary schooler, you're not going to get recommendations for Captain Underpants as an adult. So there's quite a few. That's a whole other webinar. I think we actually have a webinar on that. So those are just the first ones that come to mind. Any other questions? Okay. Well, I do want to give a shout out. We have two additional Aspen webinars coming up. One with event integrations with Aspen on May 22nd, and then another with Aspen Discovery Lida app. So if you heard me talking about the app today, you'll be able to learn all about it there. And with that, I would like to say thank you for attending. And yeah, I hope to see you at some of our other webinars.